One letter, one number, and the ultimate super saloon, M5. Now that the BMW M5 is 40 years old, it's time to decide which one is the greatest of them all. We're going to drive an example of all 6 generations and name one of them our favourite M5. We're starting with what we're calling the classics, the first 3 M5s spanning 1984 to 2003, roughly the first 20 years of M5 production. We'll come to the moderns in the next video. It all began right here 4 decades ago with the E28 M5. BMW had produced sporting 4-door saloons before this, but this was the first time the now iconic M5 badge had ever been used. The E28 M5 was the fastest saloon car on the planet. Its 3.5 litre straight 6 produced 282 brake horsepower, plenty in the mid-1980s, particularly in a car weighing just over 1,400 kilograms.
So this is Genesis then, this is where the M5 story begins. First impressions, lightness. It feels like a light car, feels like a compact car. And light, the whole cabin is flooded with light. There's loads of glass, thin pillars, visibility is really good. So the first impressions are lovely. Then you get going. The engine immediately stands out. It's a really lovely, zingy, energetic straight 6. It revs really well, beyond 6,000 RPM. And it sounds sweet as a nut. Oh, it's fantastic. It's not lightning quick, of course it isn't, but it gets going really well. This car has got an aftermarket Hartger short shift kit, so it doesn't feel like your typical rubbery BMW manual gear shift. They felt the same for decades, but not this one. It's sharper, snickier, more direct. Yeah, I like it. This really does feel like a classic car to me in many ways, and I mean that actually as a compliment, because you really have to work it, you have to be a bit patient with it, you have to understand the car. You can't just grab it by the scruff of the neck and throw it at a road, you have to work with it. The steering, for instance, is really slow, typical of the era, I suppose. So it takes quite a lot of steering lock to get around even a moderate corner. So that's an example of you being quite busy at the wheel in this car. And it loads up, it really loads up a lot when you get into the middle of a corner. This E28 has a lovely blend of ride and body control because it's a pretty light car. So the ride comfort is really good, even on some of the bumpier roads around here. It's smooth, you don't feel the lumps and bumps, it doesn't rattle you about, but then because the car's light, there's good body control as well. It's not getting wallowy, it's not losing control of its mass. You do have to get stuck in driving this E28. You have to work the steering. You have to chase the red line to get the performance out of the car. You have to get down the gears for the same reason. It's better when you work harder at the wheel, it really is. Initially you think, it doesn't want to be driven hard, but the harder you go, the more you stick it into a corner, the more speed you carry, the more fun it becomes, and then you start enjoying, well, that lovely engine for one thing, but also the rear wheel drive balance, the agility in the car. So you put the work in and you get the rewards out. And that's the thing about these older performance cars, when they're good anyway, you have to work at it, they reward you for it, and that just means they're really engaging, they're really fun to drive. No wonder the M5 became such an icon. It got off to a flying start. The Intercooler is more than just a YouTube channel, it's also a multi-award-winning, ad-free online car magazine on website and app. We've got what we think is the finest team of automotive writers working anywhere in the world today. Better yet, we're offering you 3 weeks absolutely free with no credit card, no commitment, just 3 weeks completely free on us. In that time, if you wanted to, you could read every story we've ever published. That's more than 1,000 stories and close to 2 million words. So to get 3 weeks completely free on us, simply click the link on screen and sign up in seconds.
The E28 was replaced by the E34 in 1988. It still used the same straight-six engine, initially a 3.5 litre unit, and estate body or touring was available in left-hand drive markets. In 1991, the updated E34 M5 arrived with a 3.8 litre straight-six, producing 335 brake horsepower. This is one of those updated 3.8 litre cars. So a chunk more power than the E28, but more weight as well, more than 200 kilograms of extra mass to deal with.
So the question is, can you feel that extra weight? And the answer is yes, you really can. It immediately feels like a bigger, heavier car, but it does also feel a whole lot younger than the E28, a bit more like a modern car. 3.8 litre straight six. 3.8 for a straight six is big. The biggest straight six BMW has ever put in one of its cars. And it's a strong, brawny, torquey engine. It does so much more through the mid-range than the E28's engine, but it still spins out well beyond 6,000 RPM up towards 7,000 RPM. So it is pretty quick, this thing. All that extra weight means this E34 doesn't have a better power to weight ratio than the E28, not much, but the extra torque does make a difference. We've got a more conventional BMW style manual gear shift here, no aftermarket short shift kit, so it's a sort of rubbery, knuckly kind of feel. It has quicker steering, it has lighter steering. We've still got a really good level of ride comfort in this car. These old M5s, they ride beautifully. It is a quick thing, this. You have to get up it, you have to use the revs, chase the red line, get down the gears, but it is a quick car, and it does feel more modern than the E28. It's easier to get right on top of it, to use all of the grip in corners. It just comes a bit more naturally. Maybe that's me, maybe that's just that I'm used to modern cars. I just feel more comfortable hustling this thing. It also feels tougher to me. The E28 wasn't fragile, but it is a near 40-year-old car, that, so you treat it with a level of respect, don't you? This one just feels a bit more up for taking a bit of a kicking. The soundtrack is actually very subdued. It's a sort of distant, raspy, straight six kind of sound. It would be nice to hear more of that. I love the way this E34 M5 looks. I think of all 6 M5s, this might be the best looking. I just love the proportions, the shape, the sort of understated styling. Yeah, it looks fantastic. Given that it's more than 200 kilograms heavier than the E28, it's amazing, the body control in this thing. You load it up in a corner, get on the power early, and just feel how positively it gets away from a bend. Actually, the big difference between this one and the last M5, the E28, is just how much happier it is being hustled. You can drive it like a modern car. It's perfectly up for it. Something has definitely been lost from modern performance cars with massive power and torque, with paddle shift gearboxes, with such sophisticated suspension and electronics. They're so fast. They are so capable, but it's unusual to feel like you're using all of their performance. You're squeezing everything out of them on the road. But that's exactly the feeling I'm getting from this E34 right now. Like, I am getting everything out of it, and it's so much fun.
In M-car circles, the E39 M5 is like the second coming. They say this is one of the greatest performance BMWs ever built. It replaced the E34 in 1998 and was the first M5 to be fitted with a V8. It produced just under 400 horsepower in a car weighing 1,800 kilograms. So does it live up to its billing?
The E39, the only car among these first 3 M5s that I've driven before, actually this very car. I spent a couple of days in it, so I know it pretty well. the first one not with a straight six but a V8, and you realise the benefit of that V8 straight away. The sixes in those older cars, they're lovely, they're zingy, they have lively top ends, but the moment you put your foot down and feel how this V8 picks you up, the torque that you have through the mid-range, and then you realise that a super saloon really does need torque. It's a big part of the driving experience because they're heavy, they're big cars. You need that torque to make them feel lively, to make them feel quick in a straight line, and that's what you get with this lovely V8. You've also got more of a soundtrack than you do in the E34. It's not a super noisy V8 rumbly kind of sound, but there's more character to it. This E39 has a super long gear lever. It sort of comes up halfway to the headlining, it seems. But the shift itself is typical BMW fare, really. Yeah, the engine is the centerpiece. It's the heart of the car. And it's energetic as well. It doesn't have the same buzzy, vibrant top end as the sixes. You have to expect that, really. But it's more effective as a powertrain for this type of car. The steering is so much sharper and quicker than the other two. It's not rack and pinion steering, it's still recirculating ball, which is probably not what you'd necessarily choose to have in a high performance car, but it's pretty good. It's not super detailed, there isn't loads of feedback, but it's accurate, it's sharp, it's quick. Again, lovely ride quality. That clearly was super important to the engineers at BMW M. They wanted these M5s to have a level of duality, to be comfortable as well as fun to drive, and this E39 is maybe the best at those two disciplines. Everything about this car feels 20 years younger even than the E34. It feels generations ahead of the other two cars. The cabin, the refinement, the steering, the performance. You wouldn't believe there was only, what are we talking, 15 years between the E28 landing and this E39 arriving? 15. Feels like 30. Oh, it's so well judged. It is brilliantly done. It's fun to drive. Let's stick it into a couple of corners. Feel what happens. Loads of grip, way more grip than the other two. And when it starts to go, you feel the balance in the chassis. When you think about what we want from a super saloon, right? Big performance, effortless performance, great handling, a level of usability, a level of day-to-day practicality, character, all that stuff. This E39 M5 nails, not just better than the other two, but better than any other super saloon of the era. It is a magnificent car. This video is proudly sponsored by car finance specialist JBR Capital. Now, we work with JBR Capital because we think they understand what it means to be a car enthusiast. Talk to JBR Capital today and you'll talk to an actual person who'll help you put together a finance package to suit your specific needs. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. JBR Capital will consider offering a finance package on any car. So if you've been turned away by other car finance companies, you know where to go. High-end car finance is all JBR Capital does, meaning it understands the car market and car enthusiasts better than most. So before you finance your next sports car, supercar, classic car, even a brand new car, why not see what JBR Capital can do for you? Visit jbrcapital.com or click the link on screen, and this is the important bit, remember to tell them the Intercooler sent you. JBR Capital is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So, the E28, the E34 and the E39, Andrew,
yes,
broadly represent the first 20 years of M5 production. They are the first 3 in the series.
Yes.
The job for right now is to choose one of these cars to go into the shootout with the 3 modern, or the winner of the 3 modern cars, one of which will be declared our champion.
Not easy, is it?
It's not easy
it's so
at all.
hard.
And I've been surprised at how close it is, and actually the outcome as well.
Yeah, we've been here all day, haven't we? We've been driving around, jumping in and out of them all day long, and it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? But I think my mind is clear now, but it is such a toss-up. So I don't think there are any wrong answers here.
No, there are no wrong answers. It's so fine. But let's start with the E28 then, the original.
The original.
The smallest car here, the lightest car.
Easily the lightest car here, hundreds of kilos
by a
lighter,
long shot.
even than the E34.
And compared to the heaviest car, the heaviest M5 ever, it's something like 600 kilos lighter, which is an enormous amount.
Certainly
isn't
half
it?
a ton, yeah.
Tell us about this then. I mean, 84, the E28 was introduced, so 40 years ago.
Exactly.
Does it feel 40 years old?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's basically 1970s technology in it. The engine in this is actually remarkably little different to that in the M1. It's actually slightly more powerful.
So it's a supercar engine.
It is absolutely a supercar engine, and you know, installed in that. I think what we have to kind of try to remember is what a sort of standard saloon would have been like in the mid 1980s.
Yeah, what kind of performance you'd have expected?
Maybe 120 horsepower. Yeah. I mean, a 520 I would have had 115, 120 horsepower. This comes along with 286.
Yeah.
It's a rocket ship.
It must have been amazing.
Rocket ship. And okay, I'm not quite old enough to have driven these when they were new. Sadly, I am old enough to have driven those when they were new. But you know, I remember these, and you know, they were up with the M1 and the E30. These were the cars that really, upon the entire M empire, has been built on their reputations. Yeah. I mean, it's good fun. I mean, it's light and it's narrow and it's nimble, and
it has that classic car feel.
It has that classic car feel to it. It's not as structurally rigid as the other ones, and you feel that too. But really, it's dominated by that engine. It really is a motorsport engine, a racing engine. You know, the engine in this is the engine that was in the back of the BMW M1 Pro cars that raced at Le Mans and they raced at Monaco. So, you know, unlike some later M cars, this has got proper motorsports pedigree behind it, and it kind of dominates the experience, and quite rightly so. But actually, at the same time, it's also in a comfortable four-door, four-seat saloon with an enormous boot. And I think you just have to try to remember how extraordinary it was to have a car of this performance and that level of practicality 40 years ago.
Yeah, that combination hadn't been seen before, and it must have been extraordinary. But let's move on then to the E34. I think this car looks fantastic.
God, it's just, to me, this is what M car should look like. Yeah. It's so subtle.
Yeah.
It's all about how it drives. It hasn't got any of these sort of look at me bits on it. No. Quite the reverse. It wants to hide what's under there and how it goes. And it's just so...
There's nothing really to give it away. The wheels...
Paired back, it's got the wheels. It doesn't even have, you know, the E28's obviously got that big spoiler on the back. This is just so beautifully discreet and understated. And I love that about it. It's one of the things I love absolutely. You could drive this and no one would ever know.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful.
This one doesn't have a radio.
No. It doesn't seem to have air conditioning either.
It's not working, is it? I was sweating a bit in there.
No, I think you got the button, but if you didn't pay extra, you didn't get the compressor to go with it. Oh. No, back then, you know, radios were optional extras. Yeah. You didn't have to have them.
So if this is, broadly speaking, a 1980s car, this one is a 1990s car.
This is very much a 1990s car.
But it feels more modern, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the principle's exactly the same. Yeah. The engines are very closely related.
It's just a bit bigger.
You know, this is a 3.8 litre engine as opposed to a 3.4 litre engine. It's got quite a lot more power, but you know, straight six in the front, 5-speed gearbox, rear-wheel drive. The formula is the same. It's just been brought bang up to date, and you can feel it in, you know, the car it feels tighter, it feels more together. It would probably be a better daily driver, but it's still wonderful to drive. It is a lot heavier, but I actually think it copes with that weight very well. When these were out, you know, remember it was up against things like Lotus Carlton.
Yeah.
Now I can remember doing a twin test with this on a Lotus Carlton. Wow. Lotus Carlton, way faster. But we all preferred this.
Did you?
Yeah.
Just sweeter to drive?
Just sweeter, better balanced, nicer, just more rewarding. I mean, the Carlton was a bit of a brute in a suit, whereas this was a really, really highly tuned driver's car, which just happened to be also a four-door saloon.
Yeah, you're quite taken with this one, aren't you?
Very
I am as well,
this.
actually. Okay, so let's move from the 90s into the 2000s. Actually, it was new in 1999, I think, the E39 M5. But it's broadly speaking a 2000s car.
Yeah.
And it's the only one of the three that I had driven before.
Yeah.
And I really like it.
Yeah. You see, it's interesting. When we arrived here today, I thought the E34 was going to just blow this into the weeds. And I think you thought the reverse.
Yeah.
And
you expect, so yeah, okay, because you've got
not in
previous
terms
with
of
this
performance,
car.
but just in terms of the feel
Yeah.
and what I want an M5 to be like.
Yeah.
And yet I got back in this, and and I drove this very car when it was brand new, and it's lovely. It varied the formula, 6-speed gearbox, V8 engine, but none the worse for that. It's certainly a car which has got its eye more on the sort of being the consummate all-rounder.
Yeah.
It's got double glazing.
That's right, it is the all-rounder, isn't it? It's
They
so
never
refined.
have done that on the earlier ones.
It's so
because
refined and
it's
so comfy.
exactly, and I think actually, when we come to talk about the more modern ones, I think this is the template for those cars. It is a much, although it hasn't got turbochargers and it hasn't got flappy paddle gear change or anything, in terms of the philosophy, the concept, I think that's where the modern M5 started, was with the E39.
Yeah, bringing in that element of luxury.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's an important component of the M5 nowadays.
I mean,
isn't it?
I would say that this is a luxury executive car which happens to go like hell and drive really well, whereas the E28 and the E34 are driving machines in four-door form.
That's very interesting. Right, so step back a little bit, because I think we're addressing these two cars, aren't we? We're choosing a winner between these two cars. Lovely as the E28 is, I think we're both agreed that it comes down to these two.
Yeah.
We're going to have a slightly different opinion on these. If it was just me, I would choose the 39.
Okay, if it was just me, I would choose the 34.
It's so fine for me though, proper cigarette paper stuff, that actually I can back you on this one. I can back you on the E34 being the pick of the early BMW M5s.
Can I tell you why?
Yes, you should.
Okay, this is faster.
Yeah.
It's more civilized. But I think the engine in this is peerless. The fact actually that it's a proper race-derived engine does matter to me.
Yeah.
I think it's got nicer steering. It feels, to me, puts you in closer touch with the road. It's slightly more compact. I mean, I agree with you. There's nothing between it. But, gun to head, forced to choose, I'd go that way.
I can back you on that. I can, because I had a ball driving this car.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how you could get right on top of it, get up it, hustle it through a corner or a sequence of bends, and it loves it. You don't feel like you're flogging it, like you're doing something it doesn't want to do.
Car.
It's a driver's car.
It's a driver's car.
It really is. It would be better with air conditioning on a day like today.
But we're not going to hold that against it.
We're not going to hold that against it. So this is the one. The E34 goes into the grand final against one of the modern cars. Now that video of the modern trio will go live later this week, although if you're watching this a few days after this video goes live, there'll be a link up here to go and watch the new cars, the shootout of the new cars. And in that video, we will declare either the E34
or the whatever.
Yes, from the new bunch.
Yeah.
That to be the finest BMW M5 there has been.
So the new bunch are the E60.
Yeah.
With the
Screaming
V10 engine in it.
Yeah.
The F10, the first of the twin turbo 4.4 litre V8s, and the not quite current anymore F90 in M5 CS.
Very, very special CS.
Very special.
Guys.
Yeah.
So there we go. Stick around for that video. And while I've got your attention, please subscribe to this channel. Remember to comment below, let us know what you think of these three cars. But also go and check out the-intercooler.com. That's our award-winning, multi-award-winning, ad-free online car magazine. And Andrew will have written a beautiful, I'm sure, story on these three cars. So if you want more background on these three cars, what they're like to drive, why we have chosen the E34 as the winner, click the link and go and read that story now. Thank you very much for watching.